Do you know me? Do you know what I am? Do you want to know my name? Tell me. This is what I am called. I am called Glad of War, Grim, Raider, and Third. I am One-Eye. I am also called Highest and True Getter. I am Grimnir and the Hooded One. I am All-Father, Gondlier, One-Bearer. I have as many names as there are winds, as many titles as there are ways to die. My ravens are Hugin and Moon in thought and memory. My wolves are Fakey and Gary. My horse is the gallows. I am...
Odin. So Odin is my patron deity. I'm planning on going over how we find our patron deities and why in a later video. So for me, finding Odin happened very early in my baby heathenitude. Like, it wasn't really hard to find my patron deity and to realize that he had basically been there my whole life. And this goes over some of my personal spiritual beliefs, which I know I don't go over too much because I focus more on the practical. But again, we'll kind of go over what that means and all that in a video specifically on how to find your patron and why. One of the draws was the many aspects of Odin. I'm an artist, I'm a warrior, obviously former Marine, martial arts since I was 9. Went to school for kinesiology. It's been a very big, important part of my life. If you'll remember from my Being Berserker video, as well as a little bit from my Did Berserkers Use Mushrooms, I talked about how I grew up with a wolf for the first 7 years of my life, and I consider myself a Ulfithnar because of my associations with the wolf and my connections to my more primal side. And again, I go over that more specifically in those videos. That's specifically the Being Berserker. And the Berserker are considered Odin's men. Also, the Synex. Odin is very much that wise old teacher. He is the Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Yoda, the Gandalf. There's a reason Gandalf is very much modeled after the physicality of Odin. And then, of course, my needs as an individual, which I may not have realized at the time. Well, that's one of the things that draws us to our patron deities, is what we need, what we aspire to become. And I find that as I have gone up in years, which I'm currently 34 and a half, I am more associating myself with the Synex. I have become more of a teacher. I'm now a father. Although my son's 2.5 years old, I feel like I've kind of molded into that role pretty well. And then also with Odin, the journey is very difficult. There was an Odinsman in the Kindred when I first got into Ausatru. I've talked about them a little bit, the Roots of Yggdrasil. I remember him saying that a relationship with a god is like pruning a tree, but with Odin, you are the tree. There's a lot of hard lessons. There's a lot of difficult, hard lessons, and I'm fairly hard-headed. I mean, time and time again in my life, if I have felt disdain or hatred toward a certain person or a certain group, something happens in my life that shows me the humanity of that group, the humanity of that person, or where I'm wrong. Constantly, my biases are broken in front of me. I mean, it helps that at a very early age I realized that was one of the issues with the world, is that people have these strong biases. But like I said, I realized that this figure had been there. And who knows, maybe on the spiritual plane, that Synex figure, Odin, maybe he has been guiding me this whole time. I don't know. We can only speculate, right? So who is Odin? Odin is the shaman, the Seithman. Seithar being the magical practice that Freya brought into the Aesir that historically is associated with the Sami people, which are the indigenous people to Finland, now Upper Scandinavia, which I've talked about them a little bit. They're the reindeer herders. He is a god of sacrifice, of magic, of warriors. He is a chieftain as well as a wandering vagrant, seeking knowledge and wisdom wherever he can, sacrificing for that knowledge and wisdom in order to circumvent his own fate and the fate of his kin, of his fellow deities. So in my research, the closest Proto-Indo-European root that I could find for Odin was Paxuson. And this is according to, and I'm probably going to slay this name because I'm pretty sure it's Gaelic, if not Welsh. Ceisiwr Serith? So Serith, his page defines Paxuson as, and I'll put a link in the description below as per usual, the protector or shepherd, is very much a pastoral deity. As a famous descendant, Pan, and you'll see this horn figure come up multiple times, skipping over the little notes and stuff, is also the source of the Vedic Pushan, who we'll go over, god of herds and roads. Mercury, Hermes, is also associated with, and may have a functional cognate in the Gaulish Cernunnos, horned god. Originally probably a god of herds, from the location of the pastures outside the homestead and the nature of the herds between property, domestic, and wild. Because of where they are herded, he early, apparently still in the Proto-Indo-European period, became a god of bidirectionality. He is the one who stands between. He guards travelers, merchants, and go-betweeners. He guards herds, sources of wealth, as well. He may thus be prayed to both as opener of the ways and as giver of prosperity. I'll see some of those themes that keep coming up. So another interesting descendant of Paxuson, assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly, of course. I do my best. If you know how to properly pronounce it, try in the comments. Because after all, I'd rather be proven wrong than stay wrong, right? So Velea, if you remember Velea from the Slavic mythology, and I mentioned him in my Loki video, as he's very much the antithesis of Perun, the thunder god, and the chaotic force, as he's very much a pastoral deity. He's a horned deity. He's a protector of herds, god of magic, darkness, wolves. He's also associated with the bear. It's believed that he transforms into a bear. The bear is associated with a berserker. Obviously, Odin has wolves. He's considered the lord of the forest. That's something you see with like Pan and Cernunnos. And I'll put a link to a website talking about that a little bit below. Now, the closest to the etymological Proto-Indo-European root is Pushan, right? The sun god, or a sun god of Vedic mythology. And this is according to vedicgoddess.weebly.com, which again, in the description. Pushan, sun god. The name of this deity is said to derive from the verb pusyati, literally meaning cause to thrive. So his name, it means one who causes people to thrive. Makes sense, it's the sun, right? Many hymns are addressed to Pushan, and sometimes in connection with Indra. He is praised in 8 hymns in the Rig Veda. Some of the hymns appeal to him to guard livestock and find lost livestock. His chariot is pulled by goats. Sometimes he is described as driving the sun in its course across the sky. He seems to represent the sun as a guardian of flocks and herds. Now we'll jump to depiction. Pushan, or Pusan, is a Vedic solar deity and one of the Adityas. His individuality is vague and his anthropomorphic traits are scanty. He wears braided hair and a beard. He is the god of meeting. Pushan is responsible for marriages, journeys, roads, and the feeding of cattle. He is the conductor of souls to the other world. It's a psychopomp, which is a theme we'll keep seeing. He protected travelers from bandits and wild beasts, and protected men from being exploited by other men. He was a supportive guide, a good god, leading his adherents toward rich pastures and wealth. He carried a golden lance, interesting because Odin carries a spear, a symbol of activity and signifying his constant movement. He is seen as riding in a chariot pulled by goats, they mentioned that earlier, and is sometimes made a sort of sun god, hauling the sun across the sky with his golden aerial ships. Pusan acts as messenger of Surya. He moves onward, observing the universe, and makes his abode in the heaven. He is a guardian who knows and beholds all creatures. And we'll see some more of those themes keep coming up too. So another interesting connection, and this comes from the Hermeticists. So the Hermeticists believe that Hermes Hermes Thrice Majestus, Hermes Thrice Great, imparted certain knowledge and wisdom, and there's kind of a mystery cult associated with that. That's where as above, so below comes from. Supposedly the Freemasons descend from this, and I mean, lots of different mystery cults and occult anything has associations with Hermeticists in general. Which came first entirely, I'm not super sure, but it's pretty fascinating and well worth the read. I'll try to put a couple links below if I can find some decent ones. But they associate Hermes / Mercury with Thoth in the Egyptian. If you're at all familiar with any kind of new agey some fluffy bunniness, Thoth and his emerald tablets, ancient wisdom, I believe Thoth gave men writing, yeah. And then Hermes is also associated with Lu in the Celtic mythology, the Irish Celtic mythology. Lu is a sun god. Lu is a trickster, which again keeps coming up. Velea is a trickster, right? Pan is a trickster. Hermes is a trickster. And then Odin also has trickster aspects. Lu is also considered a psychopomp. A psychopomp is a being that helps you to travel to the next world. Think Charon from the Greek, or Anubis in the Egyptian. Even the Grim Reaper, who has some physical characteristics that he shares with both Saturn and Odin, gods of death. So Cernunnos is again associated with the pastoral god Paxuson, and on polytheist.com we also see an association on here, and this is a pretty well researched site. Again, I'll put a link below, and it says on here Indo-European equivalent, Paxuson, talking about Cernunnos of course, the Indo-European god of herds, wealth, merchants, and bidirectionality. And under meaning of the name, it actually cites that Serith's site and somebody named Kondratiev both give us god with antlers. Green disagrees, whoever Green is, slightly translating the name as horned one or peaked one. So Cernunnos is most likely a descriptive name, which is something that also comes up a lot with deities in general. So it's not necessarily a full-on etymological origin. And you also have an association with Arawn, whose name I may be pronouncing incorrectly because it's Welsh, and Welsh is a difficult language at best. So I have a couple of sources here. One seems like a bit more of a fluffy bunny website, the whitegoddess.co.uk. Arawn, god of the underworld, terror, revenge, and war. Arawn was the king of the otherworld realm of Annwn, the world of delights and eternal youth, where disease is absent and food is ever abundant. Arawn was the owner of a magical cauldron with rejuvenating powers that would not boil a coward's food. And that's interesting because in Valhall, which is Odin's afterlife, Valhall being the proper name, Valhalla is actually a romanticized version. They like to throw A's on the end of stuff, like Frigga and Hela. It's actually Frigg and Hel. The A's are, again, romanticized. But the Einherjar, the worthy dead in Valhalla, rejuvenate every day. Obviously, Odin's not a big fan of cowards. He takes in the best of the best warriors, right?
You're all here because you're the best of the best. Marines, Air Force, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, NYPD.
And it's also possible that Valhall is actually a figurative version of the mass graves on the battlefield. And then here's where we see a stronger connection to Odin. And this is according to Mythopedia.com. Again, link in the description. Arawn, Lord of Annwn. As Lord of the Hunt, Arawn is connected to other Celtic gods, including Cernunnos, a mysterious Gaulish god who is considered the Lord of Wild Things. Similarly, Arawn is related to Odin, the Norse Lord of the Dead, who also happens to be a master magician. Arawn, master magician as well. His Germanic form, Wotan, is skilled in hunting and the Lord of the Wild Hunt, a title that sometimes goes to Arawn. And that's something else you keep seeing with what seems to be descendants of this pastoral deity. They lead the wild hunt. I believe King Arthur is even said to lead the wild hunt. Often heroes are associated with that, but Arawn, Cernunnos, Odin, sometimes even Satan, are said to, and that's obviously a Christian influence, but are said to lead the wild hunt, this yearly event where they go around, slaying the evils of the world, which in a practical sense is probably a time going from winter to summer, when the ice melts and life begins anew. And there's another bit of a symbolic connection, and I'll put an article that defined this pretty well below. The Morrigan and Odin have a lot in common. The Morrigan, if you're unaware, is a goddess of battle and magic, a lot of things that are associated with Odin. It's possible that she's a little bit more associated with the Valkyries, but you see a lot of similarities in symbolism. Odin has ravens, Morrigan has crows, Odin has 2 wolves and is associated with wolves, and the Morrigan literally has shapeshifted into a wolf. She's shapeshifted to fight Cuchulainn the hero. Cuchulainn actually might have an association with the Berserkers. One, his name means Hound of Cullen, so there's the close association with wolves, hounds, right? He's also got like a Hulk-like form that he takes, which a lot of people associated with the Gungar, the fury that the Berserker go into. So there's just some similarities there as well. And there's a lot of New Agey theories that believe that there may have been like ancient teachers and part of these sun cults that kind of spread this ancient wisdom across the world, which honestly I don't put much stock into, but you can see how they would draw those conclusions. There's a lot of these things keep coming up. So my theory, after doing all this research, is kind of twofold. One is that Odin may have a more euhemeristic origin. Euhemerism is when a human, or according to the Christians, demon, becomes aggrandized to the level of a deity. And we see this with Bragi, right? Bragi is, in the lore, said to have been a skald that was just so awesome at scalding, that was just so awesome at what he did that he ascended to the level of God. We also see this with Wayland the Smith, who in Norse lore is considered an elf, which can be seen as an ascended person, but in the Welsh is actually considered a god of smithing. And of course the elves, if you remember from my Alpha Bloat video, don't exactly have an exact definition. There is some correlation with the fairies of Celtic mythology, just because they have a lot of similarities, like causing mischief and whatnot, and being associated with burial mounds and a few other things. So it's plausible that Odin was just some badass shaman back in the day that became so revered that they moved him up to the level of deity in their beliefs in order to remember him. It's also possible, and this is my other theory here, and these could both be true, it could be one or the other or neither, but in Snorri's version of the creation myth, Odin's 2 brothers, instead of being Vili and Ve, are Lothar and Hoenir. Lothar possibly could be Loki, which is interesting, and Hoenir we don't have much information on. Now, if Lothar is Loki, what we could be seeing is this pastoral deity has disseminated into 3 different aspects. It's possible that Hoenir, and there's no proof of this is just my speculation, that Hoenir may have taken on some of the characteristics that we don't see in either Odin or Loki. Whatever about him may have been lost. All that's known is that he's considered Odin's friend. In Snorri's mythology, Snorri's Edda, Hoenir is one of the hostages given to the Vanir, and Hoenir is with Mimir. And if you remember, Mimir is the head that Odin has preserved, that also is the giant at the well when Odin sacrifices his eye to drink from the well and gains the wisdom of Mimir's well. So it's also very possible that Mimir is like a very ancient being. Again, the lore doesn't really say, we can only speculate. So according to Snorri, Hoenir is kind of a pretty dumb guy, a himbo, if you will, that needs Mimir around to not be an idiot. But it's possible that Hoenir and Mimir are thought and memory, which are actually Odin's ravens. So there's kind of an interesting correlation there. But because Mimir might mean memory, might be associated with that, which would make sense with this ancient being that's got ancient knowledge, right? Because he remembers it. And Hoenir may be thought, and thought may be useless without memory. So there's kind of an interesting philosophy there. Lothar, the other brother, may be Loki. And this could be why we don't see some of the more villainous characteristics that we see in like Velea, for example, in Odin. We still see some of the trickster aspects in Odin. For example, he's often known to give the wrong name. He'll set things into motion through subterfuge. He's very much depicted that way in American Gods, which I have not seen in the series. I've only listened to the audiobook. And he's very much a con man, which Jackson Crawford agrees with that depiction, which is pretty interesting. And that's because of those trickster aspects. Like when Odin gains the meat of poetry, he not only tricks the farmhands to murder themselves by sharpening their scythes, but he also lies to the giant. He tricks the giant into drilling a hole into the rock that is in front of the cave that houses the giant's daughter that is guarding the meat. And then once the giant drills that hole, Odin transforms into a snake. That's a very trickster thing to do. Goes through the hole and seduces the daughter, and then makes away with the mead by drinking it, transforms into an eagle. Again, trickster thing to do. And then in order to escape, craps out some of the mead, which is why we get bad poetry. We get shitty poetry because Odin shit out some mead of poetry, which is absolutely hilarious. So technically we can blame Odin for Michael Bay. Remember that. So yeah, Odin, again, has a lot of those trickster aspects, and it's a possibility that he was disseminated into these three different deities. It's also possible that a human figure had these aspects thrust upon him, and that could be the historical Odin. We don't know. And it's fun to speculate, to be honest. This would also make sense with why Loki is Odin's blood brother. It's kind of implied. I don't think it literally says it from what I remember, but I believe it's implied that Loki and Odin made a pact. If you remember, I talked about this a little bit in my Loki video. That's why Odin lets him into Aegir's Hall and, Lokasenna, and Loki starts to call everyone out, yada yada. And that's because Odin made this oath that him and whenever he had a drink, Loki had to have a drink. But again, that oath was because they were blood brothers. So it's entirely possible that this one deity disseminated into three. It's also probable that what the pastoral god has turned into is very much a winter deity. This is actually something that's more commonly seen in the Celtic lore. So the two fairy courts, and this is kind of a interesting bit too. You have the Seelie and the Unseelie, and this is actually where the word silly comes from. The Seelie or Silly court is the summer court, and then the Unseelie is the winter court. If you ever watched Lost Girl, how they have the light fae and the dark fae, that's where that idea comes from. And it's literally just the cycle of the year. Sometimes the dark crowd would be on top, the winter, and then sometimes the light crowd would be on top, and that's the summer. And that could very much be an inspiration for why we have a conflict between the thunder deity and these deities of darkness, like Perrin and Velea, or Thor and Loki. So what's it all mean? Summing it all up, Odin never started out perfect. Odin is very much a god of sacrifice and learning the hard lessons that you need to better yourself. That's definitely how I see him. That's definitely been a cornerstone in my life. We never start out perfect. We may strive to get there. It's an impossible feat, but that doesn't mean you can't come close. Obviously, that comes through introspection and stuff that I've been talking about on my channel for the past year. So now my channel's a little over a year old. And change. Things change. The Odin that slayed Ymir with his brothers to forge the 9 worlds is not the same Odin that we understand today. The Odin that threw his spear against the Vanir is not the same Odin that wandered the 9 worlds in search of wisdom. And it's through that journey and those hard sacrifices he made, not only sacrificing his eye, but the sacrifice of hanging on Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and 9 nights, sacrificing himself to himself, that he was able to gain the wisdom of the runes, right? Odin teaches us to examine ourselves, to look inward. Not everything is simple. He is very much that trickster archetype as well, that rides the line of light and dark. He may not be as malicious as Loki. He may not have the same mischievous streak, but he's still there to teach you hard lessons and to test you. Those are the needs that draw you to Odin. Let's remember, a relationship with a god is like pruning a tree, but with Odin, you are the tree. Like, comment, subscribe, do the thing. My links are below all the other links if you want to follow me on various social media. And remember to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday. We are the sum of our actions, and the gods are within us all. Stop!